Ever get the feeling like, there's got to be more to language than just like words. Like some languages are almost like a key
Oh, yeah.
to unlock a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe.
Totally. Absolutely. I mean, language isn't just about communication,
Right.
It really shapes our thoughts and how we perceive the world.
And that's what we're looking at today. We're doing a deep dive into a language that honestly feels almost mystical in its power,
Yeah.
right? Sanskrit.
Oh, yeah.
We got this really cool article from the Spiritual Sikh.
Of course. Yeah.
And they always seem to find these like hidden gems of spiritual insight, don't they?
They do. They really have a knack for it.
This one is exploring how Sanskrit is more than just a language.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a doorway to these profound truths about existence, consciousness, the whole cosmic dance, right?
It's not just about like learning vocabulary. It's like tapping into a whole different way of thinking.
So what is it about Sanskrit that makes it so special for conveying these like really deep philosophical ideas?
Well, one of the key things is its precision. Okay. Unlike some modern languages, Sanskrit is incredibly systematic with an intricate grammar system that makes it remarkably precise, which is perfect for dealing with those complex spiritual concepts.
So it's like a language designed for just laser sharp thinking about the big questions.
It really is. And then there's the way Sanskrit builds words from roots.
Right.
And these roots, they carry these core meanings, and then you build upon them to create more complex words. It's almost like building with Legos.
Oh, I love that analogy.
But for ideas.
So you're not just memorizing random vocabulary.
Right.
You're understanding these like building blocks of meaning.
Precisely.
Okay.
And that's where things get really interesting, because those roots, they create connections between concepts that you might not otherwise see. The article gives a great example with the word dharma. Now, in English, we translate that as duty or law.
Right. And it's always felt like a really flat interpretation.
It is a very flat interpretation.
Yeah. Yep.
There's so much more to it. In Sanskrit, dharma also encompasses things like cosmic order, moral responsibility, your inherent nature, even universal truth. It's this whole universe of meaning packed into a single term.
Like those Russian nesting dolls.
Exactly.
You open one and there's another one inside, another one inside.
They keep going deeper and deeper.
Yeah, it just keeps going.
And by understanding those root connections, you start to see how these seemingly different ideas are actually intertwined. That interconnectedness, that's at the heart of Eastern philosophy, and it all comes back to the structure of Sanskrit, which is designed to highlight those links.
So the language itself is like a guide to understanding this interconnected nature of reality. That's pretty mind-blowing. But I also have to say, I'm a little skeptical about how much we can really grasp that just by talking about it.
Well, think of it as more of a starting point. The article also talks about this concept of Shabda-Brahman, which is the idea that sound itself is the ultimate reality. Ancient sages believed that the sounds of Sanskrit, particularly when chanted, could actually resonate with cosmic vibrations.
So it's not just the meaning of the words, but the sounds themselves have this power. I mean, I've definitely felt that kind of energy in music.
Yeah.
But to think it's built into the very fabric of a language is a bit much, isn't it?
It's a fascinating idea, isn't it? It makes you think about the power of language in a whole new way.
It really does. It's like Sanskrit isn't just a way to communicate. It's like this technology for tapping into something much larger than ourselves.
That's a great way to put it.
And is that why Sanskrit has played such a central role in so many different philosophical schools?
That's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
You've got your Vedanta, Sikha, yoga.
Yeah.
All these major schools of thought using Sanskrit to express their core ideas. I think for a long time, I just assumed they used it because it was the language of the time.
But now I'm wondering if there was a more deliberate choice in using Sanskrit.
Oh, absolutely. What's fascinating is how each school uses Sanskrit in slightly different ways.
Oh, okay.
But it's always that bedrock of precise meaning that allows them to explore these really subtle philosophical concepts.
Can you give me an example of how different schools might use Sanskrit to express their ideas?
Sure. Take the root vid, which means to know. From that one root, you get words like vidya, meaning knowledge, Veda, which refers to wisdom or sacred knowledge,
Okay.
and vidvan, meaning a learned person.
So it's like this beautiful web of connected meanings.
Exactly.
All coming from that one core idea of knowing.
It's all interconnected, yeah.
My brain is starting to hurt just thinking about it.
Well, we don't want to overload you.
It's like drinking from a fire hose of knowledge.
We're just getting a taste
Right.
of the depth and the richness that this language has to offer.
Okay.
And speaking of getting a taste, the article highlights 10 profound Sanskrit concepts that really showcase this unique wisdom that's embedded in the language.
We're not going to go through all 10 of them, are we?
Of course not.
Yeah.
We want to leave our listeners wanting more, not running for the hills.
Right.
We've picked a few that we think are particularly intriguing and maybe even relevant to your life, dear listener.
All right, so let's dive in. Hit me with your first pick.
Let's start with Ritamvara.
Ritamvara. It's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. What does it even mean?
It means that which is filled with truth, or truth-bearing.
Okay, so it's about more than just knowing facts, right? It's about directly experiencing truth.
It is. The article mentions that this kind of wisdom, Ritamvara Praja, comes from deep meditative absorption. It's intuitive and infallible because it's a reflection of ultimate reality.
That's deep. But how does this apply to us in everyday life? We're not all meditating sages living in caves, are we? I mean, I struggle just to find 5 minutes of peace and quiet.
Well, think of it this way. How often do we get caught up in our own limited perspectives, our own biases and assumptions? Ritamvara reminds us that there's a deeper level of truth available.
Okay.
If we can cultivate the inner stillness to access it. And there are practical techniques for finding that stillness, even in our busy modern lives. So it's about quieting the mental noise and opening ourselves up to a more direct experience of reality.
It is.
I can definitely see how that would be valuable.
And it's about trusting your intuition, your inner knowing, rather than always relying on external sources of information. We all have that capacity to connect with Ritamvara.
I like that. It's a call to look within for answers, to trust that deeper wisdom that's always available to us, even when we don't realize it.
And that's a message that's incredibly relevant today when we're constantly bombarded with information from all directions. Ritamvara reminds us that we have the capacity to access truth directly if we're willing to do the inner work.
Okay, Ritamvara is all about tapping into that inner wellspring of truth. What other profound concept have you pulled out of this article?
How about anovachanya? It's a bit of a mouthful, but trust me, it's worth exploring.
All right, I'm intrigued. What does anovachanya even mean?
It means indescribable or beyond words.
Wow, that's pretty meta for a word. But if it's truly indescribable, isn't this whole conversation pointless? How can we even talk about something that's beyond words?
That's where the paradox lies. Anovachanya isn't meant to discourage us. It's meant to point us toward a different way of knowing. It's an invitation to go beyond the limitations of the intellect and experience truth directly through things like meditation, contemplation, and self-inquiry. It's about acknowledging the mystery and embracing the unknown.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. It's like we're trying to point at the moon with our words, but the real journey is to actually go there.
Exactly. And that journey often begins with accepting that some things can't be fully captured by language. Anovachanya points to a reality that's greater than our ability to conceptualize it.
So it's not about erasing the mystery, it's about being open to it.
Precisely. And isn't that where the real excitement lies? In the exploration of what we don't yet know. That's the invitation Anovachanya offers us.
Okay, 2 profound Sanskrit concepts down, and my mind is officially blown. Ready for another.
Bring it on. Let's dive into Svadhyaya, which emphasizes the importance of self-discovery and personal growth.
Svadhyaya sounds like it has something to do with study.
You're right on the mark. It means self-study or the study of sacred texts. But it's not just about hitting the books or memorizing scriptures.
Okay.
It's about actively engaging with those teachings and reflecting on how they apply to your own life and your own experiences.
So taking those ancient truths and making them personally relevant?
Exactly. It's about turning knowledge into wisdom, into something that can actually transform your life.
I like that, bridging the gap between theory and practice.
Right.
Like, what's the point of all this knowledge if it doesn't actually change the way we live?
Exactly. And it's about taking responsibility for your own spiritual growth.
Okay.
Svadhyaya reminds us that we're not passive recipients of knowledge, but active participants in our own learning and development.
Right. We're not just waiting for enlightenment to fall into our laps.
We are not. We're taking those teachings and making them come alive in our own lives. Exactly. And that's a process that can continue throughout our lives. There's always more to learn, more to discover, more to integrate.
It's a lifelong journey of growth and understanding.
That's what makes Svadhyaya such a powerful and relevant practice for us today.
Okay, I'm sensing a theme here.
Ah.
All these Sanskrit concepts seem to be pointing towards taking an active role in our own spiritual development. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's not about blindly following dogma or relying on external authorities. It's about cultivating inner wisdom and discernment. Which brings us to our next concept, right?
Viveka.
Viveka. Hit me with it. What's that all about? Viveka is all about discernment. It's the ability to distinguish between what's real and lasting versus what's temporary and fleeting. Separating the signal from the noise.
So it's about seeing through the illusions.
Exactly. In a world that's constantly trying to distract us, viveka is essential for staying focused on what truly matters.
Isn't that a struggle for everyone these days, though? It's like we're drowning in information and choices.
Oh, absolutely. Viveka helps us prioritize our time and energy to invest in what's truly valuable and let go of what's not serving us.
Yeah.
It's about developing that inner compass, that sense of knowing what's right for us, even when the outside world is screaming 1,000 different directions.
Wow, I think we all need a little more viveka in our lives. I know I do.
We could all use a little more viveka, and that's something we can all cultivate through practices like self-reflection, meditation, and yes, even studying those wisdom teachings.
4 profound Sanskrit concepts down, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface, but my brain needs a break.
Let these concepts sink in, dear listener, and we'll pick up our deep dive into the wisdom of Sanskrit in part 2. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Sanskrit.
We've been on quite a journey already, right? Exploring all those profound concepts like embedded in this ancient language.
Yeah. It's amazing how these words, these ideas can still resonate so powerfully after thousands of years.
It really is. It's like they tap into some timeless wisdom about the human condition. And those concepts we talked about, Ritambara, Anirvachanya, Svadhyaya, and Viveka, they each offer like such a unique perspective on how to live a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
Absolutely. And we've got a few more gems to share with you today.
Okay, I'm ready for more. What's next on our Sanskrit adventure?
How about we explore a concept that's particularly relevant to anyone interested in non-duality or like the interconnectedness of all things?
Okay.
It's called Pratibimbavada.
Pratibimbavada.
Oh.
Okay, my tongue needs a bit of practice with that one. What does it mean? And how does it relate to this idea of interconnectedness?
It's often translated as the doctrine of reflection. It's a beautiful way of explaining how individual consciousness, what's called jiva in Sanskrit, reflects universal consciousness, known as Brahman.
So it's like saying we're all reflections of the same divine source. But doesn't that diminish our individuality? How do we reconcile this idea of oneness with our unique experiences?
That's a great question. Think of it like a mirror reflecting an image. The mirror doesn't change the essence of what it's reflecting. It simply creates a separate but ultimately connected image.
Okay, I can see that. So we're all individual reflections of the same ultimate reality, but we retain our unique qualities. But how do we get so caught up in the illusion of separation then?
That perception of separation is due to what's called avidya in Sanskrit, which translates to ignorance. It's like this veil of illusion that prevents us from seeing our true nature, which is one with Brahman. But through practices like meditation and self-inquiry, we can begin to lift that veil and experience that underlying unity.
So Pratibimbavada is like a reminder that we're all connected. We're all part of something much larger than ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a powerful thought, especially in a world that often feels so divided. It kind of makes you want to reach out and connect with people on a deeper level.
It does, doesn't it? And it's a perspective that's becoming increasingly relevant as we face global challenges that require us to work together for the common good.
Absolutely. If we can truly grasp this idea of interconnectedness, it can totally transform the way we relate to each other and the planet.
Okay, ready for another concept?
Ready when you are. This next one is about accessing a state of pure awareness beyond our usual waking, dreaming, and sleeping states.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing. Tell me more. Is this something we can actually experience?
This state is called turiya in Sanskrit, which simply means the fourth. It's like the fourth state of consciousness beyond the 3 that we experience daily. It's described as pure awareness, devoid of any thoughts, emotions, or sensory perceptions, a state of complete unity with ultimate reality.
That sounds almost impossible to imagine. I mean, my mind is constantly buzzing with thoughts. How do you even access such a state? It's definitely not easy. It requires dedicated practice and a deep commitment to inner exploration. Practices like meditation, yoga, and contemplation can help quiet the mind and open the doorway to turiya. The Mandukya Upanishad, one of the ancient Sanskrit texts, describes Turiya as the silent background upon which all our experiences arise.
So it's like this ever-present stillness that's always there, even when we're not aware of it.
Exactly. And by cultivating stillness and deepening our awareness, we can tap into this underlying state and experience a profound sense of peace, unity, and liberation.
It's like discovering a hidden dimension of reality. I'm starting to see how these Sanskrit concepts can offer such profound insights into the nature of reality and our place in it. Okay, hit me with one more concept, and then I think my brain will need a break to process all of this.
Okay, this last one is particularly relevant to understanding our own behaviors and patterns. It's called samskara, which translates to impression or mental imprint. These are subtle traces left on our subconscious mind by past experiences, thoughts, and actions.
So it's like our past experiences are shaping our present reality. That makes sense. It's like those times when you know you should react differently, but you just can't seem to help yourself. Are you saying we're just doomed to repeat our past mistakes?
Not at all. Samskaras can explain why we react in habitual ways, but they don't have to control us. By becoming aware of our samskaras through practices like self-reflection, meditation, and even therapy, we can start to break free from these limiting patterns.
So it's not about erasing our past, but about understanding how it's influencing us in the present. And then we can choose to act differently.
That's the key. It's about bringing those unconscious patterns into conscious awareness so we can make different choices.
I love that. It's like taking back control of our own minds and our own destinies.
And that's ultimately what these Sanskrit concepts are all about, empowering us to live more conscious, fulfilling, and meaningful lives.
This has been such an incredible journey so far, but I have to admit I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by all this wisdom.
We've only just begun to scratch the surface of the wisdom embedded in Sanskrit. But maybe it's a good place to pause and let these ideas sink in for a bit.
Definitely. I think our listeners could probably use a break too.
Join us in part 3 as we continue our deep dive into this ancient and powerful language. We'll be exploring its influence on other traditions and discussing why these concepts matter now more than ever.
Welcome back to our Sanskrit deep dive.
Yeah.
We've covered some seriously mind-bending concepts so far.
We have. It's been quite the journey through the heart of, ancient wisdom, you know?
It really has.
Yeah.
And one thing that's striking me is how these Sanskrit ideas aren't just relevant to, ancient sages or people who live in ashrams.
Right.
They feel incredibly relevant to our lives today, even if we're not hardcore spiritual seekers.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
These concepts speak to something so fundamental about the human experience, something that transcends time and culture.
Right. And speaking of transcending cultures, I'm curious about Sanskrit's influence beyond India. The article mentions how it shapes not just Eastern traditions, but it's had a global impact.
It's had a massive ripple effect.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, all these major traditions have their roots in Sanskrit.
Right.
Their core texts, philosophical frameworks, practices, it all comes back to this language.
So understanding Sanskrit is almost like having a master key to unlock these entire spiritual traditions.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And then there's the way those traditions spread, carrying those Sanskrit-based teachings with them. Buddhism, for instance, spread throughout Asia, carrying those seeds of wisdom far and wide.
We're talking about a profound influence on the spiritual landscape of a vast region. It kind of makes you wonder how differently things might have unfolded if those ideas hadn't taken root.
It's fascinating to consider.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just stop there. Even Western philosophy has been touched by Sanskrit thinkers. Like Schopenhauer were deeply influenced by Upanishadic ideas that were translated from Sanskrit.
Wow. So these ancient concepts have been making their way west for centuries.
They have. And in more recent times, we've seen a surge of interest in practices like yoga and mindfulness, which are rooted in Sanskrit Pali terminology.
It's like Sanskrit is having a global renaissance.
You could say that. And I think it speaks to the universality of these concepts.
Yeah.
They address those fundamental human questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and purpose.
Right.
Questions that go beyond any one culture or tradition.
Absolutely. It's like Sanskrit is a bridge, connecting different cultures and traditions, all seeking these deeper truths about existence.
Exactly. And that's why I believe these Sanskrit concepts are so relevant today.
Okay.
They offer this timeless wisdom that can guide us as we navigate the complexities of modern life.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Why do these ancient ideas matter now more than ever? I mean, the world has changed so much since those concepts were first articulated.
Well, for one thing, they offer this antidote to the materialism and consumerism that dominate our modern world. You know, concepts like svarya, the study of sacred texts for self-transformation, encourage us to turn inward and connect with our deeper selves.
It's a reminder that true fulfillment comes from within, not from external things.
Precisely. And in a world that's constantly bombarding us with distractions, concepts like viveka, discernment, help us filter the noise and focus on what's truly important.
It's about making conscious choices, right? Not just being swept along by the current of like the latest trends or fads.
Right, and then there's Maitri, loving kindness, which is more relevant than ever in a world that often feels so divided and polarized.
It's about cultivating compassion and connection, even when it's difficult, even when we disagree with each other.
Exactly. And the best part is, these concepts aren't just theoretical.
Correct.
They have practical applications in our daily lives.
So it's not just about sitting around and contemplating the universe. It's about actually putting these ideas into practice.
We can incorporate Maitri into our interactions at work or in our communities. We can practice Svataya by journaling or engaging in meaningful conversations. We can cultivate viveka by being mindful of how we spend our time and energy.
So it's about taking these ancient ideas and making them come alive in our modern world.
Exactly. It's about bridging that gap between ancient wisdom and contemporary living.
This has been an incredible exploration, really.
It has.
We've gone from the structure of the language to the profound philosophical concepts it unlocks to its global impact and timeless relevance.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
And hopefully it sparked some curiosity in you, dear listener, to explore Sanskrit further.
I know, I'm feeling inspired. It's clear that Sanskrit is more than just a language. It's like a doorway to a whole universe of meaning and wisdom.
And if language shapes thought, just imagine the possibilities opened up by a language designed to express the subtlest nuances of consciousness and existence.
That's a powerful thought to leave us with. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Sanskrit.
Until next time, keep exploring.